Hey, so in this video, I'm going to talk about my experiences and my relation to video games and how they've impacted me and how they still impact me and influence me in many ways. Um, from a super early age, I was just playing video games, kindergarten and up. I was playing Nintendo and all that, but I feel like my real just enthrallment with video games started when I was around 12 years old and got an Xbox 360, and then after that I just lost interest in almost everything other than video games. It was definitely a way for me to escape my reality, to feel like a sense of freedom through this virtual reality, and to create things that I just wouldn't be able to create in this reality and feel like I'm some sort of powerful character or something like that. And just entertainment. And yeah, around my mid-teens, it just was, it was even increased even more. I started playing a lot of really competitive games like World of Warcraft and League of Legends, and other things like that, like player versus player, very strategic, competitive games where I'm facing other players or other teams. And that was basically all that I felt interested in. I stopped being interested in more casual games. It was all about I want to test my skills against other real people, and shoot up through the ranks of these very competitive games. And for a long time, I really just wanted to be a professional competitive gamer. I think a lot of kids that play video games would love for that to be their reality. And yeah, definitely using it for an escape. I felt like in my real life, I felt I had very low self-esteem. I was homeschooled and had hardly any friends. The only couple of friends that I had were friends that I played video games with, and I'd go to their house and we'd just set up the computers and play video games. So not a whole lot of friends to do other things outside of video games with. Didn't know any girls. Was very insecure. I kind of just felt like trash or scum of society. In my mind, I just had all these thoughts that I was some worthless thing just taking up space and air from everybody else, because I felt like I had no sense of purpose or passion, or I wasn't contributing to society. I was just sitting at home playing video games, but I didn't really know how to get out of that cycle. And so I'd play video games all day, pretty much every day, and then go to sleep very depressed and just have to get through the night, sometimes crying at night, because I just felt so useless and I wasn't ever gonna amount to anything. And it was just okay, I just have to get through this night so that way I can wake up the next morning and hop back on the video games and distract myself all day again. And so that went on until around my 20s, probably around 20 years old, is when I really made a conscious decision to stop so much with the video games. It's also, I stopped playing video games right around the time that I went raw vegan. I think they kind of went hand in hand with each other. But since I was 12 years old until I was around 20, I spent most of my hours playing video games almost every day, and I built up so much addiction and habit around video games like nearly half my life, I've probably spent more hours playing video games in my life than probably any other activity on this earth. And so I'm just saying all that to give you an idea of how I believe, like how deeply embedded in my psyche video games are. I've identified that my top 3 addictions are food, video games, and romantic relationship. Those are the 3 things that I'm the most attached to. And video games are just one of my go-to comforts, especially while I'm fasting. Because food is my number 1 go-to comfort. But when I'm not eating, then my mind is like craving all these other things. And usually the number 1 thing that it craves, which is very easily accessible, I just pull out my smartphone and download an app, and then I can like be in this virtual reality. Yeah, video games, which I used to feel some shame around, like, okay, hi, you're supposed to be this developing conscious being and you're still like giving into video games. To me it just sounded like childish, or I think I was also mostly worried about the opinions of others, like what are other people going to think if they know that I'm playing video games. But I don't really have any concern about that anymore. I know how ingrained video games are in me and how much work it's taking to unravel that habit. And for me, it's basically my drug, or it was my drug. It was my cigarettes, it was my alcohol, and I never really had a huge addiction to any of those things. Video games was my thing, and so that's what I'm trying to, release from my mind. And I can see it dissipating more and more, and especially when I'm doing things like fasting, where I can really take a look at it, and just like be with the craving and the desire without trying to give into it. Of course, if you watched my last video, I did download some video games. This is the 8th day of a water fast that I'm on. I told myself that after every 7 days, then I'm allowing myself some mindless entertainment for the day, and I can just like watch Netflix and play some video games to just kind of help me through. And that feels really acceptable to me, because in the past when I've done water fasts, sometimes all I'll do is like watch TV and play video games and like watch anime and read manga. So I can just see the progress. It seems slow. To a lot of us, our progress seems so slow and we're not satisfied with where we're at. But when I look back, just a few years, just in the last year, and if you look back in the last year or the last 5 years, typically you can be like, wow, the progress I've made is so great. Like the habits that I am no longer, reacting to as heavily is like immense. And so I know that this is a progressive thing, and I feel really satisfied with the progress that I'm making, and I can just like see it vanishing. And of course I have more work to do, so it feels really good for me that I am where I am, and that the limited amount that I'm allowing myself, just feels okay. I would love to not be putting anything in my mind that is, say, mindless entertainment, especially because so many video games are just revolved around like war and conflict and competition and ideas that are just not like peaceful. And especially while I'm fasting, I really want to just have peaceful, aligned thoughts, and like everything that I'm intaking, I want to just be really light-filled. But there's definitely still some addiction to my whole life watching movies and playing video games revolved around violence and killing and war and sex and all that. So there's still like this thing in me that craves it and is entertained by it. But I notice on this fast, I feel a lot more sensitive to things that I'm seeing in like shows and video games. Last night, a funny story. Last time I fasted in Mexico, towards the end of my stay in Mexico, I was watching some Netflix, and there's like the DC comic series Titans, and I watched like pretty much the whole first season except the last 2 episodes. I was like, okay, I'll watch these last 2 episodes when I get back home. And then I get home and I can't find Titans anywhere on Netflix. And I found out that it's not available in the US on Netflix. It's available in Mexico on Netflix, but not in the US. And I was like, oh no, the last 2 episodes. So last night I watched the last 2 episodes of it here in Mexico, but just like starting to watch it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. It's a pretty like violent, vividly gruesome, superhero show. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I might be a little too sensitive right now for this. And I just noticed my emotional responses to the different characters and the scenarios was really heightened, like more of a sense of empathy for the characters in the show and the situations, and just be like, oh, this is so effed up. So my desire is definitely to get to a point ultimately where, I've just given up on all these things and I don't really entertain myself with anything that isn't really like positive. And I also feel okay with where I'm at in indulging in these things. But yeah, video games are so enticing in this society for youth who have not really much sense of direction or like how to navigate themselves in this life, in this society, and feel very lost and without purpose. And then video games are just like this thing where you can go into this reality where you have like purpose and a mission and you're a hero, and you can progress rapidly. You can like climb the ranks of this reality super fast and like upgrade yourself and all that, where in true reality, so to speak, it just feels slow. It feels really slow, like what takes us possibly years in this reality we can do in a matter of days or weeks in a video game. And it just feels good to feel like you're progressing in something and have some sort of purpose. And I'm not really liking what I'm seeing when it comes to like military, like real military stuff that's associating itself with video games. For me, it seems like a lot of these video games are basically like gearing up people and young adults or young children to join the military. It seems very obvious to me, and that was even a big thing for me. Was, first of all, I felt like I had no skills growing up in life, hardly, and no purpose or passion. And I'd be playing all these video games like Call of Duty and other war games, and so that's already implanting in my mind these ideas of war and violence and like guns and terrorists and all that. And then this idea that, okay, well, since I have really nothing better to do with my life, I may as well join the military. because there'll be benefits. I'll feel like I'm serving a purpose. So that was definitely a thought that I had many times growing up playing video games, was I'll just join the military. And then I went to a GameStop a couple months ago with my roommate because he plays a lot of video games. And yeah, I just see like this little thing sitting on the counter that's like talking about joining the military. And I was like, wow. It didn't at all surprise me. I feel like young kids who play video games are probably a huge target audience for the military. The military, I'm sure, knows that these kids probably don't have a lot going for them and that they're already acquainted with violence and war, and a lot of the time they're even acquainted with all these different like guns and ammunition, and they are usually very coordinated. Actually, like, video games do create a lot of hand-eye coordination, and I believe that a lot of kids that play especially highly competitive video games are probably gonna be great like sharpshooters just naturally, and like very reactive. So it seems like the perfect audience for the military to go for. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that because that's something that I see that I don't necessarily like. I don't recommend the military for anyone. And yeah, I suggest if you're a parent to just limit the use of shows and TV and movies and video games as much as you can. If you can eliminate those things completely and just do things like hiking and camping and more natural things with your children, then they're gonna not have all these embedded things like horror and violence in their minds that are deeply embedded in them that they then have to work out later in their life. And they're probably going to find more of a sense of purpose and passion and happiness at a very young age. I know just from meditation and other things like fasting, but mostly meditation. When I sit in meditation, especially going to retreats where I'm just meditating all day, it's so obvious how much shows, movies, and video games influence me, influence my mind, and like how these really dark things in my mind just come from these movies and video games. And it's just like, I don't want that there. I'm just like, oh my gosh, why was I so heavily just like ingrained with all these images and these ideas, and now I'm trying to like work on myself and purge all these things, and I just constantly see these things coming up from past movies and things like that, that are just these weird ideas in my mind. I'm like, oh no, please, I don't want that there. So those are some of my thoughts and experiences with video games and movies and things like that, but mostly just wanting to talk about my video game experiences and addiction that I have. So yeah, thank you for watching. I know it's been kind of a long video. Hope you enjoyed it and got a little bit out of it. Talk with you soon.